Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the Civil Service Examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Delhi edition dated 17th September 2022. The topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. Now this article has appeared at page number 6 in today's The Hindu Delhi edition. The topic reads, the consequences of the declining fertility rates are many. So as the topic is clearly mentioning the context of this very news article, which is the fertility rate, which in turn means population changes. So now because we are dealing with the population changes, hence it becomes an important topic as far as General Studies paper 1 is concerned, and that too the section of society. The context of this very article is the recently released population report by the United Nations. It says that despite the fact that the absolute number of population is still increasing, but still there has been a significant decline in the fertility rates. So that is why it says that some reports suggest that the population could grow to around 8.5 billion in 2030. This means that there is an rise in the absolute population levels. But there is an interesting aspect to this, that the average global fertility has been consistently declining. Now the question arises that how is it possible? To understand this very thing, first you need to understand that what exactly do you mean by fertility. So the fertility rate is the number of children which one woman can give birth to during her entire reproductive age. So that means that if the number of children born out of one woman, let's say, is 3, then it means that the fertility rate is 3. Similarly, the number of children born out of all the women within one country is calculated and is divided by total number of women, and then we get the average fertility rate of that country. So this fertility rate is declining, which means that it might happen that 1 decade back the number of children born out of one woman was 4 and now it has reduced to 3. So that means the fertility rate has declined, but still, because out of one woman, that is out of one pair, husband and wife, 3 children are getting born. So that means that there will be an increase in the absolute population level. This means that absolute population level can increase despite the fact the fertility rate is declining, and this is exactly what is happening in India also as well as the world also. So this particular article talks a lot about demographic transition. However, the specific demographic transition theory comes as a part of geography optional, but because this article is mentioning it, so from the general studies perspective, we will just have a brief that what is this theory all about. So there are 5 stages of demographic transition. Demographic transition basically tells us the changes in the population level. So there are 5 stages: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 and stage 5. And there are 3 lines in this particular graph. One is the birth rate, one is the death rate, and third is the total population. So what happens in stage 1? The stage 1 is a situation whereby a country is having a very high birth rate as well as very high death rate. So this means that the total population of that very country will be lower, because yes, we agree that the number of children getting born are very high, but again the number of deaths taking place in that country is also very high. So as much as the new kids are born, the old age population is dying. So that is why the natural increase of this population is very stable or a very slight increase. As soon as we enter into stage 2, With advancements in health facilities as well as other technological advancements, we are able to lower down the death rate. This line, the lower line, is the death rate. So the death rate drastically falls, but the birth rate is still very high. And that is why this stage 2 is the situation whereby the population of a country explodes, because birth rate is still very high and death rate is getting reduced, which means that the new kids are born at same rate, but the people who are dying has reduced and the life expectancy has increased. So the net difference is very large, and that is why there is a rapid increase of population here. When we enter into stage 3, now we are also able to reduce the birth rate. So here you can see the birth rate is also falling and the death rate is getting almost stagnant. So now what means that death rate has become stagnant and birth rate is falling. So that means that now the population increase gets slower. Yes, there will be an increase because birth rate is still higher than the death rate, but this increase, the rate of this increase will reduce, right? So now here, can you remember this? That there is a situation whereby absolute population is increasing, but still the fertility rates were decreasing. This is stage 3, whereby the birth rates, that is fertility rates, are reducing, but still there is an absolute increase in the number of population. Now comes the stage 4. Now in stage 4, there is further decrease in the birth rate, there is almost stagnant death rate, and that is why the population starts falling, and in the later stages it becomes stable. And in the stage 5, what happens is that the death rate gets increased and the birth rates gets reduced, and this is the stage of negative population growth. That means that the children getting born are lesser than the old age people getting died. And this is exactly where some of the countries have reached. For example, Japan, Germany, Russia, etc. Correct? So this is the population pyramid of all these stages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So out of all these pyramids, this pyramid is very important for India because this is the stable population growth level, that is population is increasing but its rate is slowing down. Correct? So this is the demographic transition theory. This theory says that every region, the demography or the population changes in every region is sequential in manner. That is, in stage 1, the total population will be very low and almost stagnant. In stage 2, the population will start rising exponentially. In stage 3, the population will increase, but the rate of increase will get reduced. In stage 4, the population becomes almost stagnant, and in stage 5, the population increase becomes negative. So first of all, we will look at certain data in the global scenario which this particular report has given us. It is obviously in the context of the reduced fertility rates. So according to the World Population Prospects 2022, the fertility rate has been reduced by around 50%. It was around 5 in 1951 and it has further reduced to just 2.3 in 2021. Now there is an important data, that is 2.1. If the total fertility rate reaches 2.1, we say that replacement levels have attained. Now what is this replacement level? This means that the number of newborn children is exactly equal to the number of old age people getting died. When this ratio or when this number becomes equal, we say that there will be no increase in the population and the absolute number of population will remain same. So this is the replacement level, that is the number of newborn children are replacing the dying population. But presently, according to World Population Prospects, the TFR of the entire world is 2.3. Second important observation which it has made is that the poorer countries are having faster transition. Now, what does this mean? This means that the time taken for the developed country, let's say, to move from stage 2 to stage 3 was far higher than the time taken by the poor countries to reach from stage 2 and stage 3. That means the progressive development or the changes in demography in the poorer countries is faster compared to the rich countries. Next important thing it says is that still there are certain regions, especially the sub-Saharan African region, which will continue to contribute a large share in the overall population growth levels of the whole world. That is why it says that these countries will contribute around 50% of the total population growth after 2050. Further, it says that most of the advanced economies have reached to their replacement level, that is 2.1. Many of these countries have also reached to a level below 2.1, and that is exactly the stage whereby the negative population growth rate starts. Now comes to the Indian scenario. National Family Health Service says that the fertility rate below the replacement level has been achieved for the first time in India, and TFR has reached 2.0 in 2021, which means now we are entering into stage 4 of demographic transition. The replacement levels reached below the replacement level, that is 2.1, below this figure, which is exactly 2.0. Further, it says that this rate has dipped 10% in just 5 years. If you have to understand the chronological order of this reducing TFR in India, it is presented in front of you. In 1950, India's TFR was 6, that is, on an average, 6 number of children were getting born by one woman throughout her reproductive age. In 1975, that is approximately after 25 years, it was reduced to 5. Then, within the span of 15 years, it reached 4. And Kerala was the first state who reached the fertility level below the replacement rates. And finally, in 2021, there are only 5 states which are having the fertility rate above the replacement levels, and these 5 states are Bihar, Meghalaya, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Manipur. So, this data is again very important for you. It can be asked in prelims also, as well as obviously the whole topic is important from the mains perspective. Clear? So now we need to understand that what are the various impacts of reduced fertility rates. So obviously there are certain positive impacts, then there are certain negative impacts also. It all depends that if we are reducing the population growth in any country or any region, we have to be very clear that what is that level beyond which we should not reduce the population. We should have the minimum mark as well as the maximum mark. We must not increase our population beyond this level. We must not reduce our population beyond this level. So the populations should be somewhere in between the minima and the maxima. So now, if the fertility rates are getting reduced, by this we generally mean that the populations are also getting reduced, the number of population is getting reduced. So the positive impacts will be, first, that there are possibilities of increase in women education, because earlier when there were a lot of children in one family, so because of the skewed economic resources, more focus was given to the boy child, and that is why the women lacked education. But with reduced fertility rate, with reduced population, those resources can be distributed for the women empowerment also. And if the women is getting educated, then there are further chances of reducing the fertility rates also. The famous example for this is the Bolsa Familia program, which was started in Brazil. I would recommend to read a little bit about this Bolsa Familia program. You will come to know how the things like financial inclusion, education, empowerment, and population levels are intricately linked to each other. The second important thing is the reduced pressure on the natural resources. It is very obvious. The third important thing is if there are low population levels, if the fertility rates is getting reduced, then obviously there will be better employment opportunities. What is happening in India now? Just on one seat, there are lakhs of aspirants who are sitting for that one seat. This is not just true for the civil service examinations, it is true across all the major examinations, whether it is IITs or anything. And eventually, obviously, because seats are restricted, so the major chunk of the population is not selected and then they move towards the private sector. Now, because there is a labor surplus everywhere, so obviously the employer is in a better situation to negotiate with the laborers, and that is why the incomes of those laborers will get reduced, because the thing is that if I am not agreeing to any particular wage, I feel that it is low, there will be someone else obviously who will be willing to take that wage and do that work, because there is a huge population pressure, there is a huge supply of labor. Correct? So that is why if the population is reduced, then there will be better employment opportunities, there will be better incomes, savings, as well as investment. Further, there will be better social security benefits. Most of the population will be in a position to take the benefits of various government schemes. And then there will be chances of better administration also. Why is it so that very large states, for example, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, generally have the law and order problem? There are several reasons for it, but one reason is obviously the very high demographic load. It is beyond the potential of any administration to take care of such a huge population, right? So these are certain positive impacts. Now, obviously, if the fertility rates are getting reduced below this minima level, then there are certain negative impacts. First is there will be a rise in the dependency ratio. Now, because the new children are not getting born and the burden of the old age population is increasing. So, that is why the dependency ratio will increase and there will be a reduction of the working age population. Because if the children are not born, obviously they will not get young and they will not work. So, there will be reduced working age population. This reduction of this particular working age group further will lead to fall in the national output. Further, because old age population was increasing, it will further increase the fiscal burden or the fiscal pressure of the government, because now the government will have to meet the social security costs. And the last dimension is of the possibility of the immigrants influx. Because let's say this is a particular region A and it is not having adequate working age population. On the other hand, there is population B which is having a working age population. So population will migrate from B towards A. This is exactly one of those reasons why there is a very high out migration from the states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. So these are certain positives as well as negative impacts. So now the question arises what needs to be done, and that is the way ahead. First is that the government must focus on improving the health facilities as well as nutrition, especially of the women and children, so that we can increase the average life expectancy of that country as well as the productivity of the old age population, so that there is no fall in the national output. Second is there should be reforms in the labor market as well, so as to compensate the reduced working age population with the female labor force participation. Next, if there are certain countries whereby the fertility rates have fallen below the replacement level, they are facing the stage of racial suicide or the negative population growth levels, then those countries must focus towards the state funded IVF to increase the fertilities. So these are certain steps which can help to balance the population levels across the globe. Obviously, there will be some countries which will be having the population above TFR. There will be other countries having a population below TFR. However, the overall population levels must be balanced across the world as well as across one country. This topic has also appeared at page number 6 and is in relation to a very famous personality who is very well known as far as the India's modern history is concerned. The topic reads, Remember Periyar with a pledge to embrace dissent. Now, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar was an important personality in India's modern history, not just the freedom struggle but also to challenge the prevailing social construct and to popularize the modern ideas which were based on equality, justice, as well as liberty. In this very sense, you should be aware about the contributions of E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, who was also known as Periyar. As far as the scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic is mainly relevant in two papers. First is obviously General Studies paper 1 in the Society section, and the second is General Studies paper 4 in the Ethics section. Ethics specifically mentions the contributions of famous personalities, and that is why you should be aware about the contributions of Periyar. Why this article has appeared in today's newspaper, what was the recent context? The recent context is that today, that is September 17, is celebrated as the Social Justice Day to honor Periyar's birth anniversary. In this very sense, let us look at certain key facts and his contribution to the Indian society. He was born in 1879 and has worked as Congress worker till 1925. Later on, however, he associated himself with the Justice Party of Madras. He was known for one which is very important is the self-respect movement. Now from this name you can obviously understand that this movement was basically to protect the self-dignity, rights as well as to ensure the respect. And that is why it was basically in opposition to the dominant sections of Brahmins in the social life at that particular point of time. And in this very sense, obviously, we can understand that he was against the caste discrimination which was prevalent in the Tamil society back then. The next important contribution is his participation in the Vaikom Satyagraha. Now, this Vaikom Satyagraha is very important. It was in 1924, and the objective of Vaikom Satyagraha was have the rights by the so-called lower caste people to use the public path in front of the famous Vaikom temple. And for his active participation in this Vaikom Satyagraha, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar or Periyar was later referred to as Vaikom Virar, that is, hero of Vaikom. As far as his political contributions are concerned, in 1940, he launched a political party known as Dravidar Kazhagam, which espoused an independent Dravid Nadu comprising Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, and Kannada speakers, that is, the present southern India. As a social reformer, he focused on social, cultural, and gender inequalities, and his reform agenda questioned the matters of faith, gender, as well as tradition. He is also revered as Thanthai Periyar, the father figure of modern Tamil Nadu. He was also one of the pioneering voices against the Kula Kalvi Thittam. Now, what does this Kula Kalvi Thittam stands for? This system was introduced by the Chief Minister C. Rajgopalachari. The objective of this particular thing was to impose on school children a method of education wherein the students would learn their family's profession as part of the school curriculum. Periyar was particularly against this system because he saw this as infringement of the right to employment, choose, and opportunities of the school children. So these were the major contributions of Periyar in terms of economy, society, as well as polity. You should be aware about these contributions because the questions can be asked as discussed in beginning in GS paper 1 or GS paper 4. This topic has appeared at page number 7 and is in relation to the Eklavya schools. Now, Eklavya schools scheme is very famous as far as the educational empowerment of tribal students are concerned. Though this scheme is very old, however, it regularly appears in newspapers, and that is why it becomes very important to know at least the basic key facts related to the Eklavya schools. The latest context in which this news has appeared is that recently Ministry of Tribal Affairs has been unable to fix the teachers shortage which are faced across 378 of such schools. That means that everything is not okay with the Eklavya school and there are certain issues. Obviously, the overall issues are almost similar to the issues which are plaguing India's overall educational system, and that is why in today's session we will be dealing with the key facts restricted to the Eklavya Model Residential School Scheme. First of all, it is a government scheme for construction of the model residential schools for the Indian tribal population. The tribal population constitute around 9% of India's total population. And because these schools are specifically and exclusively for the tribal population, the overall authority or the ministry which is running this scheme is the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Further, an important development took place in the budget 2018 to 19, whereby the government decided that every block in every state which is having more than 50% share of the total population as the ST population, that is scheduled tribe population, or at least 20,000 tribal persons are there, each of that block will be having the Eklavya Model Residential School. Further, the financial support in the form of grants to these schools are given under Article 275, Clause 1 of the Indian Constitution. Further, the National Education Society for Tribal Students, which is an autonomous body under the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, was set up to provide overall support and policy directions to the school in this area. And similarly, at the state level, we have state education societies for tribal students. That means we have this body at national as well as state levels. Now, an important assessment in this article has been made that despite the fact that the literacy rate among the scheduled tribe population in India has increased, but still the dropout rates among the scheduled tribe population is very high, and it ranges somewhere between 35 to 70% at primary, secondary as well as higher secondary level. This needs to be addressed as soon as possible. Right? So these are certain key facts related to the Eklavya Model Residential Schools which can be asked in your prelims examination. Now this article has appeared in today's editorial section at page number 6. The topic reads the oppressors wrong. The context in which this article has appeared is that recently the Madurai bench of the Madras High Court has taken a sledgehammer to deal with the YouTuber and blogger Savuku. Now this YouTuber has made some objectionable comments against the judiciary. He has tweeted some of his arguments specifically targeting the judiciary, and therefore the Madras High Court noted that he expressed no regret but affirmed that he would continue to speak about the judiciary after his release even if sent to the prison. The logic behind the courts retaining the power to punish Savuku lies in the objective of preserving the credibility of the judiciary and the faith in the law and order of the country. However, in today's session, we will be discussing a very important issue, that is the judicial accountability. Many a times in newspapers on regular basis, we come across such news that there are a lot of people who comment against the judiciary and then there are certain contempt proceedings against them. On the contrary, when we compare this with the comments against the executive and legislature, then we find that yes, in certain instances there are proceedings against those individuals in that case also, but relatively compared to judiciary, talking something against the executive or legislature is easy. So that is why in today's session we will not only discuss the judicial accountability, but we will also discuss that how this accountability is different from the executive and legislature. So let us begin this discussion in detail, which is very important from your mains perspective. Now the basic theme, that is separation of power and judicial independence, has been a core area in UPSC mains examination. For example, in UPSC 2019, there was a question on the principle of strict separation of power. The question asked that do you think that Constitution of India does not accept the principle of strict separation of power, rather it is based on the principles of checks and balance. This means that you have to analyze that whether there is a system of checks and balance between all the organs of the state. In 2017, UPSC asked the question with the basic core theme of judicial independence with the context of the then passed National Judicial Appointments Commission Act 2014. And similarly, in 2013, again this theme was repeated that Supreme Court of India keeps a check on arbitrary power of the Parliament in amending the Constitution. You had to discuss this statement critically. So all these three statements revolve around the common themes of separation of power and independence of the organs. Now we will come to the core theme, that is there any difference in the accountability standards and measures of the different organs of the state. So there are arguments in favor and in against for this thing. And that is why we need to be aware about the arguments from both different perspectives. So first we will analyze that why it has been said that judiciary is at a different pedestal as compared to the legislature and executive. The first and the foremost point is that the Constitution does not impose the same burden of accountability on the judiciary as the executive and the legislature. Because if you closely study and analyze our Indian Constitution, there have been detailed measures regarding the mechanism to enforce the accountability of executive and legislature, but those mechanisms are somewhat on lower side when it comes to judiciary. And in this very line comes the second point, that the present political structure of India is a parliamentary form of government having a cabinet system. Now in the parliamentary form of government, the executive is accountable to the legislature and legislature is responsible to the people. Therefore, if the legislature withdraws the support to the government does not survive, and hence the legislature and executive must be more accountable relative to the judiciary. Now in this line, Article 75 is very important. Article 75 clearly states that the Council of Ministers, that is the executive body, is collectively responsible to the House of the People, that is Lok Sabha. And though the Constitution does not specifically mention about the no confidence motion, but this very article specifies it, that as long as the Council of Ministers enjoys the majority, they can stay in power. But as soon as a parliamentary motion is moved in the Lok Sabha against the entire Council of Ministers, stating that they are no longer deemed fit to hold the position of responsibility, these Council of Ministers cease to exist. So that is why, because we follow the parliamentary form of government with a cabinet system, it is said that legislature and executive have more accountability towards these people, and because they directly deal with people during elections, this is also one of the logic that they have higher accountability and higher responsiveness towards the people of our country. The third important thing is the mandate of the judiciary. The mandate given to the judiciary is to do justice to the people. And that is why the Constitution made it an independent institution answerable neither to the executive nor to the legislature in respect of its functions. Further, the last important point which signifies that judiciary is at a different pedestal is the power under Article 142 given by our Indian Constitution to the judiciary. It says that Supreme Court in the exercise of its jurisdiction may pass such decree or make such order as is necessary for doing a complete justice. And this complete justice can be in any cause or matter pending before it, and any decree so passed or orders so made shall be enforceable throughout the territory of India. Now this is a very wide power given to Supreme Court because its order under Article 142 will be enforceable throughout India. And that is why, because this article is again signaling the fact that judiciary is at some different pedestal. But this is just one side of the coin because we need to understand the counter arguments for this also, which several other experts believe that judiciary is also one of the organs of the state, and that is why it should also be accountable and responsive towards the public. And moreover, they also provide counter arguments to all these arguments provided here. For example, when we discuss that the constitution does not impose the similar accountability on judiciary, the proponents of this dimension say that the constitution explicitly mentions the procedure of impeachment, whereby the judges can be removed by the parliament under Article 124, Clause 4 on the grounds of proved misbehavior and incapacity. The second important point is that experts say that judicial independence and judicial accountability is just a means towards the end. They are not end in themselves because the end is judicial neutrality. And because we have to ensure judicial neutrality in our country, judicial independence and judicial accountability stand as the two basic pillars of judicial neutrality. And that is why judiciary must be accountable to the public. The next important thing is the judicial activism. You must have heard about this word. What does this exactly mean? See, initially, legislatures were tasked to frame the laws, and executive were tasked to implement those laws, and judiciary was tasked to ensure justice. But recently, it has been witnessed that judiciary is there in the area, in the domain of the policy making as well. And judiciary is being involved in providing various guidelines. For example, Vishakha guidelines. So this engagement of judiciary in the policy making is known as judicial activism. But the experts say that because now the time has changed and judiciary is involved in public policy making also, that is why they must be accountable to the public as well. Because the logic is same. The executive and legislature are making the public policies, and that is why they need to be accountable to the public. Similarly, now because judiciary is also into policy making, they should also be accountable to the public, and that is why they are at the same pedestal. The next important argument is the extra constitutional devices which Supreme Court has created itself. For example, the doctrine of basic structure or the collegium system. Now, the original constitution did not provide it for the basic structure doctrine or the collegium system. But to ensure the independence and supremacy of the constitution, Supreme Court came up with these innovative doctrines. And that is why it is said that because the court is not bound by the restricted narrow interpretation, the literal interpretation of the constitution, hence while determining the accountability, the courts must not restrict themselves to the literal and parochial view of the constitution. And that is why the extra constitutional devices are needed. The next argument is related to the Article 142. Because here we discuss that Article 142 gives a wide-ranging power to the Supreme Court to ensure complete justice, and this signifies that judiciary is at a different pedestal. But if you read Article 142 closely, this power is also subject to the laws made by Parliament. So here again, if you can understand that judiciary has a check and balance system by the parliament. The thing is that Indian constitution has ensured this system of checks and balances. There is no one organ supreme in itself. And that is why the Article 142 also has reasonable restrictions. Further, under the directive principles of state policy, we have Article 50, which calls for the separation of power between the executive and judiciary. Now, under Article 50, because the two words are mentioned in the same line, this also signifies that executive and judiciary, that is, the organs of the state, are kept at same pedestal. And last important point is the recent development which has come in the context of Right to Information Act. Recently, Supreme Court has ruled that the office of Chief Justice of India comes under the public authority as far as right to information is concerned. Now, because earlier executive and legislature were already under the right to information, the coming of judiciary under RTI Act again signal us that all the organs of the state are at same pedestal and there is no difference as far as accountability is concerned. And this concludes a very important point for us. That yes, though the organs are different in nature, their functioning is also different in nature. So the means to ensure the accountability might be different, but all organs are equally accountable to the public because we live in a democracy and here the people are sovereign. And now we will look at the existing system in India which is there to ensure the judicial accountability. We have discussed this point that because the constitution provides an elaborate procedure of the impeachment of the judges of Supreme Court and High Court, this is one of the explicit mechanism in India's constitution through which the judicial accountability is ensured. The second important point is that there have been in-house mechanisms also. In-house committees have been set up across India, but these committees are not permanent in nature. Further, they also lack statutory backing. But yes, there are some evidences of in-house mechanism too. And the third thing we have again discussed that recently the Office of Chief Justice of India has come under the purview of the Right to Information Act. But again, these systems are not very efficient to ensure judicial accountability. Because the reason is that in-house mechanisms lack statutory backing and they are not permanent in nature. Further, this development is very new and the effect of this judgment is still to be seen. And the procedure of the impeachment is so exhaustive in nature, plus it also requires a huge political will that the minor misconducts of the judges go unheard. And that is why the experts say that we should go for new mechanisms to ensure judicial accountability. Now, the point is that what should we do? The first is that we should learn from international best practices, and we have the examples of USA and UK in this regard. But what have these countries done specifically? USA has provided a statutory backing to the in-house mechanisms in their country. And that is why the in-house mechanism to ensure judicial accountability in USA has a detailed, elaborated procedure backed by the laws and the rules. And those procedures are very strict and they are not merely based on conventions. Further, in United Kingdoms, they have a guide to judicial conduct which has a code of conduct for judges. It has a list of various activities that are capable of reprimand or removal, always reminding its audience that judges must be prepared for a level of public scrutiny or financial probity greater than what ordinary citizens are subjected to. Now, as we say that with great power comes a greater responsibility, and we know that judges have higher power compared to the common men of our country, that is why they also have greater accountability. So that is why we must learn from the international best practices. The second important point is that we must come up with a new judicial standards and accountability bill. Then the third thing is that we need to establish permanent disciplinary committees. These committees can be set up at the central level against the complaints which are made against the judges. Further, we need to have a performance evaluation parameters also. A regular performance evaluation system for judges will be extremely useful because this will increase the public oversight and involve the public at large in the judicial ecosystem of our country. And the promotion of the judges, their working will be evaluated on the performance which they have given. And the last important thing is the Bangalore Principle of Judicial Conduct. Now, the Bangalore Principle of Judicial Conduct is based on 6 principles. The first is independence, the second is impartiality, the third is integrity, the fourth one is propriety, the second last is equality, and the sixth is the competence and diligence. Now, the Bangalore Principle of Judicial Conduct says that this is a value of 6 principles that all judges should necessarily adhere to. So now is the time for the question of the day. The question from yesterday's DNS is in front of you. The question said that Vladivostok, sometimes seen in news, is a part of Russia located in which of the following seas? The correct answer for this question is option D, that is Sea of Japan. Now come to the question of the day for today. The question has 2 statements. Statement 1 says, E.V. Ramaswamy is known to start the self-respect movement, and statement 2 says Vycom Satyagraha was launched to bring political participation among lower castes. You have to find the correct statements out of the given two statements. Option A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, or D, neither 1 nor 2. With this, we conclude our today's session. All the very best and study hard.